Okay. Hi team, good morning and happy new year to all. Yeah, and today we are going to learn one of the most beautiful concept in JavaScript. Okay. And at the same time, many people, even who are working in IT industry for few years, they also normally struggle to understand one concept called the closures. So today we are going to learn okay what is closure and what are the tricks and turns in that concept. Okay, so before going to that, so if you want to understand closures, okay, if you want to understand closures, you should have knowledge on what is a scope. Okay, if you don't know what is scope, you can't understand closures. So if you don't know these concepts, please go back and watch previous videos in our playlist, or you can learn anywhere and come back. One thing is scope, and you should understand what is a lexical scope. Okay, and you should know what is scope chain. Okay, you should know what is scope chain. Okay, without understanding these three concepts, you can't understand closures. Suppose if you are in a position that you don't know what is scope and lexical scope and scope chain, please stop watching this video, go back to our playlist, or maybe access any videos, learn all these things, and come back and watch this video continue. Okay, I hope now if you understand these concepts, and now you are absolutely ready to understand the toughest or confusing or interesting topic that is called closures. Okay, so don't worry, I will try to make these concepts very easily. So if you watch this video completely, definitely you will understand what is closures and ready to
Hopefully,
understand. You will fall in love with the JavaScript also, because this is the most beautiful topic. Okay, without wasting time, let's jump into the code. I'm just opening a code file. So I will ask few questions in the middle. Just try to answer those things so that it will be more interesting for you and you can understand easily. Okay, fine. So just let me open that file in a browser. Okay, first before going to this, okay, if you check the definition in the official documentation, okay, it will be it's not easy to understand just by watching the definition or some going through the documentation. So we should go with some simple examples, then only you can understand. So before going to enter into the actual topic, so we should understand a few important things. Okay, I'm writing a function here. I'm writing a function that is called say hello, the simple function. So if I do console.log, okay, okay, happy new year. Okay, if I invoke this function, say hello, if I invoke this function, we know that it will print console dot, like it will print happy new year. Okay, so in JavaScript, functions are the heart of the JavaScript programming language, because The functions in JavaScript have more and more flexibility and more features than any programming language in the world. So let's see, today we are going to understand one beautiful thing with functions. Then we can enter into the closures as well. So here if you see, suppose you have a variable where x is equal to 10, okay, where x is equal to 10. So what you can do, you can either you can print here itself, right? You know, then what will happen? So it will print, suppose if you give a 2023, okay, 2023. So what it will do? It will print Happy New Year 2023. So let's see that. So if you see in the console, yeah, Happy New Year 2023. So instead of printing this value here itself, suppose we want to return that value. Okay, I'm not printing here. I'm not printing the value here. So what I'm trying to do, I'm just returning this x value. Then what will happen? We all know that if a function is returning any value, you should hold a variable. So you should store that information into the variable. So for that, I'm just taking another variable called var. Suppose a equal to, suppose, okay, nothing. Initially nothing. It will be undefined. So whenever we invoke the function, so this say hello, this whatever the value it is going to return, we can store in a. And if you do a console.log of a, then we know that, so this, whenever you invoke this function, it will create an execution context, and of course it will allocate some memory for x. It will initialization phase, it will store some value and it will return that value, and the x a value is going to be 2023, and the execution context for that function will be goes off from the call stack. Okay, fine. This is also simple, everyone knows about this. So if I remove these breakpoints and if I refresh this code again, we got the output. So there is no difficulty in this to understand. So now just try to understand the beauty of the functions. So here you can return a number. Suppose if you want to return a string, yes, absolutely you can return a string like Happy New Year. So that what will happen? This, whenever you return value x, this string is going to be stored in a. It will return that x value, and the output will be Happy New Year. So this is very simple. We all know about this already. And suppose if you want to return an array, suppose if you have the information array like goes happy with some strings new, okay, yeah. So this is the array. No problem, you can return array also. So then what will happen here? So you will in the output you will get the array information. So you can return a string, you can return a number, you can return a array also, even you can return object also. So I'm just giving the first name is Raju, some last name is equal to, suppose I'm just giving some name. So what will happen? It you will get, so it will return this whole object into a, and you can utilize that information. So this is also fine. We know all these things. So now the most beautiful thing is, suppose in case if you have a function inside another function. So this is very important. So you can return a number, you can return a string, you can return an object, you can return a boolean, you can return array also. At the same time, you can return a function also. This is the most important thing to enter into the closures. So here I'm defining a function, okay, function like new year. Okay, this is the function. Okay, in that I'm just writing console.log. Here I'm writing happy new year. So previously I was storing the information in X. Fine. So here you can return this function like this. New year. New year. What I'm doing? Previously we were returning a number, a string, or a boolean or object successfully, everything. So now if I return in JavaScript, we can return functions also. Okay, I'm not completely aware of that other programming languages. So now in JavaScript, you can return function also. So if you see in the A, you will see the function definition. Suppose if you do console.log A, it will be a function definition. And if you want to invoke that function, what you need to do? You should call this A. That means this is also a function once you return it. So let's see. First of all, what is there in the console.log of A? Then you can understand what to do. Just refresh. You got the function definition, right? So if you see, you can return a function also. Suppose if you want to invoke this function, it is very simple because he has written this new year function into a new variable called A. So that now you can invoke this function with the name A. That means you are storing this function definition into a variable. This is very, very important. Okay, what it means, you so how you are storing A right here. Suppose you are storing A is equal to 10. Suppose if then what is the meaning of this? You are storing a number into a variable. Suppose if you store this, you are storing a string into a variable. Suppose if you define like this, the meaning of this statement is you are storing array into a variable. In the same way, yes, you can store a function also into a variable. Suppose function, even without the name also, you can store. Suppose you can store console.log. If you just provide is it, or otherwise you can say that awesome. Okay. So if you see, I'm just commenting all these things. So just if you store a function into a variable, then this variable become the function. So now what you can do, you can invoke the function, so it will give the message called awesome. So this is the most important thing we should learn before entering into the closures. And one more thing is also there. So I hope you guys understood. So that means you can store a function also. Of course, suppose if you give a name for that function, sub triple x, okay, then you will get a confusion whether we need to call with a or whether we need to call with a triple x. Okay, so we should call with a only because we are storing this function into a variable. Then this variable name or identifier will become the name of the function. Okay, so that still if you see, I'm just giving a 2 so that you will get the output as awesome 2. So suppose maybe you can try like this, triple x. Let's see. I'm not sure, I didn't try. Hopefully it doesn't give the result. So if you see, it's saying triple x is not defined. That means it's saying that uncaught reference error. So it doesn't recognize this function with triple x. So if you don't store in a variable, then you can call with a triple x. Suppose if you store that variable, that function into a variable, so then you should call with that a name of a variable. So the variable is holding a function in this situation because there is no use to give a name for that, so that you can remove this name also. This is also a valid and perfect syntax in JavaScript. Of course, we are going to discuss a lot about this in coming days, but for now, this is enough to enter into the closures. Okay, just give me a confirmation that you guys understood, or do you have any questions here? Who are there in the live? Yeah, if you have any question, just ping me. If you understand, okay, just ping me yes, that you guys understood. Okay, fantastic. So if you understand this thing, then things going to be very easy to understand the closures. So far, so if you have a function, and we should understand two things here. One thing is we can define a function inside another function, that is one thing. And second thing, we can store a function into a variable, that is the second thing. And we can return that function from another function, that is also another important. That's those three things. So here I will revise one more time. Let's suppose function say hello. This is the function. Okay, observe carefully. Inside a function, you can define another function. So I'm just defining another function, suppose a new year, the message. So this is like console.log. You are just holding some message, happy new year. Okay, fine. And you should understand that we can store this function into a variable, right? Var x is equal to, this is also a perfect valid syntax. So once you have this variable, so you don't need to give this function name here. So what you can do, var new year is equal to this function. So I'm just simplifying things. So what you can do, you can return this function, return a new year message. Okay, new year message. So don't return like this. So if you use the parenthesis, that means it's invocation. So at the time it will return uh, what are the value you are going to return from this function. So right now, don't make it much more complex. So this is enough. So if you invoke this function, so it will treat this is a variable, and it will return that one. So this is another function. So here, if you can store that var a triple x equal to a say hello, okay, say hello, then what will happen? You can, if you invoke this message, if you invoke this triple x, so you will get the message called happy new year, because this is going to be stored in triple x, and whenever you invoke triple x, it will give a happy new year. So just go to the output and refresh. Yeah, we are getting happy new year. Maybe the spelling is wrong, so I will correct it. Yeah, okay. Okay, fine. So still maybe you're waiting. Raghu, we want to learn closures. Why you're just telling all this unnecessary stuff? Just wait. Because if you want to understand closures, we should learn all these things. That's why. So now we are going to enter into the closures. To understand closures, we can go with another example here. So I hope you guys remember these things. So now I'm jumping into the actual topic. So I'm just taking a different example so that it is going to be very easy to understand what is closures. So here I'm just taking a function. I'm just creating a function. The function name is called grandfather. Okay. Function name is called grandfather. And this grandfather has assets, suppose 100 acres. Okay. I don't know what is the spelling of 100 acres. How can I in 100 acres. It's very difficult for me. Okay, fine. At least if our grandfathers have that 100 acres, we are lucky. So grandfather assets 100 acres. Okay. So if you can do console.log, okay, console.log. If you give a message, so instead of giving message, it's better to return that values, return assets, so that the example is going to be very interesting. So here I'm I'm just declaring a variable where output. So I'm just giving a simple name for the variable output. So output. So if you invoke the grandfather, so suppose if you ask grandfather how much you earn throughout your life, so he will give a some information. So you have just log that information, console.log assets, sorry, output, because if you can't access this assets, right? So if you do a console.log of assets, console.log of assets, okay, just tell me what will be the output for this one and what will be the output for this line. Quick, I need answer for both the statements. So at line number 27, what will be the output? At line number 28, what will be the output? Observe the question clearly and just give me the answer properly. Quick, maybe if it is giving some delay, so even I will ping that in a chat so that, yeah, just try to give me answer quickly. Because if you are not able to answer for these questions, it's very difficult to understand what is closures. Okay, quick. Adya, Balavardhan, Sultana, Samir, what will be the output of this program? Or are you there or not, first of all? Okay, next 30 seconds. Okay, okay, they said 100 acres and maybe error for that second one. Output will be 100 acres and second one will be the error. Okay, yes, absolutely right. Okay, here why it is going to give an error at line number 28. So if you should have clear idea. So if you see the first one is 100 acres, second one is uncaught reference error, because just remember that execution context and the call stack and all the stuff. So of course I will draw the diagram again. So if you forget the diagram, you can't learn JavaScript, the simple rule. So whenever you invoke this function, it will create another execution context and it will allocate a memory for assets in a local scope. Once you come out of this function, once you come out of this function, that local scope memory will gone. So that means, and the control will come to the global execution context. So right, in a global execution context, you can access output, but in a global execution context, you can't find the variable called assets, variable or a function called assets. That's why it will give an error. So just I'm just drawing the diagram now. So I'm just taking the new screen. Simple. So whenever for this program, so this is global execution context, sorry, call stack. This is a global execution context. I hope this is not hiding. My video is not hiding the screen. Hopefully. Okay, fine. And so let me copy the code. This is very important. Scope. That's why I said if you don't understand scope, you can drop off and just go back and enjoy. Otherwise, it's a waste of time here. Okay, fine. So what will happen in the global execution context? It will allocate the memory for two variables. One is output and one is grandfather. So here in the global scope, okay, window object. Do you remember the window object? Window object here initially output will be undefined, right? And the next line grandfather is there. Okay, grandfather. This grandfather have another information, the function definition. Okay, function definition. So whenever you invoke this function, because nothing to do in a memory allocation phase for these three statements, whenever you start executing this output, of course at this particular time there is no value in the output, so still output value is undefined. And whenever you invoke this function, what will happen? What will happen? It will create another execution context on top of global execution context, and the pointer will point to the this execution context, and here it will allocate the memory for that local variable that is called assets, right? Assets. And in the execution phase it will allocate the information as acres or something. Okay, and you're returning this asset. So then what will happen? This assets information at this particular line, okay, in this particular line, output is equal to grandfather, so it will store this information which this assets variable is going to hold. It will copy into output. So what will happen? This value will become 100 acres. This output value will become 100 acres. Then this is very important. Once you come out of this function, it will remove all the memory which you have allocated for that particular function. It's gone. So now if you try console.log of output, you will get 100 acres. And if you try console.log of assets, it will throw an error because that local memory is gone. And even you can't access local memory of a function from a global execution context. So for that you should understand the scope chain. The scope chain will follow top to bottom. Means the grandchildren can access, okay, suppose if you are a son, you can take money from your father. Father can take money from grandfather, but grandfather don't have a right to ask money to from his son. So the scope chain will follow top to bottom, so that the execution context for a function that can access information from the global execution context, but global you can't access information from global execution context. Okay, when you're in global execution context, you can't access from local functions. So I hope you guys understood this point. So I will show you in the browser same thing so that you will remember. So then we can enter into the closures as well. So these things are very important. So if you don't do practice, even after 100 years also, 100 days also, you can't learn JavaScript. So now, so if you see, we are just in going to execute. Okay, right. Let me put a breakpoint here. Okay, it doesn't have a memory, that's why. So right now, just understand. Okay, before invoking the grandfather, we have only global execution context. In that scope, you have a variable called output, and definitely that will be undefined. And you have a function called grandfather. If you just scroll down, you can find in the alphabetical order. Okay, grandfather. You have a definition for the grandfather. So whenever you invoke that function, if you see, whenever you invoke the function here, clearly you got the local execution context for the grandfather. And observe okay. Hello, I just lost some problem with my computer. Are you able to hear me now? Balwardhan, Adya, are you there? Are you able to hear me? Okay, I'm sharing my screen. Okay, right now. So I try to share my screen. Why it is now? I'm unable to share my screen. Okay, I will do one thing. I'll just drop off from this meeting. I will connect one more time. Okay, meanwhile, just recollect what we understand so far. Yeah, now hopefully are you able to see my screen? Are you able to see my screen? Just ping me yes or no. Okay, fantastic. Okay, no problem. So if you see, whenever we invoke a function, it will create an execution context for that function. That is very important. And once it will complete all the execution of that function, this will gone from the memory, gone from the call stack. So right now, observe carefully in the scope. Whenever you are there in the function, it will create another scope called local scope. This is what already we understand. So here we have only one variable that is called assets, so that you will see that information initially that is undefined. So now whenever you execute it, so you will find that information as 100 acres. Now what we are doing, we are just simply returning that assets information. Okay, so that this in the global scope we have a variable called output. Definitely that output value will be right now that will be undefined. And once we execute this statement, once it is written that value, what will happen, this 100 acres string is going to store in the output. So if you see, you're able to see 100 acres. Now if you observe carefully here, the execution context for that function is gone from the call stack. This is the most important point you should remember to understand what is closure. So whenever you invoke the function, it will create an execution context on top of the call stack. And once the job is done, once it is completed that process, what are the statements you have given in that, once it is executed that, so it will remove that execution context along with its scope. What it is doing, it will remove this along with this scope also. Whatever the memory is allocated for that function is also gone. So that's why you can't able to access the information called assets, because assets is not there in the global scope. That was there in the local scope, but that local scope is not there because that execution context from the call stack is gone already. So hope if you understand this thing, now we are going to enter into the next level. Okay, so just before that, just give me a confirmation. Even if you are watching this video after 1 year or 2 months or something, okay, so just note these points, whatever I'm asking. If you understand that, then only go for the next step. Otherwise, just revise one more time. Okay, tell me, understood everyone? So if you are not aware of, if you didn't practice scope and scope chain and these things, it's of course it's very difficult to understand the closures. Okay, hopefully you guys understanding what I'm talking now. So now we can change, we can add something interesting here. So here, where assets 100 acres, now I'm creating another function inside this grandfather. Okay, the function name is called father. Okay, function name is called father. Now I'm just creating another variable. Okay, bank balance. So, okay, otherwise what we can say, money, in the form of money, how much we have. Suppose maybe here we can say 50 crores, 50 cr. Is that, is it enough for you? Otherwise you can add how much you want. Okay, so father have a money, so grandfather have assets are like 100 acres of land is there. 100 acres of land is there for the grandfather. Okay, our father have a 50 crores of money, 50 crores of money in the bank. So here what you can do, if you do console.log, if you do console.log, so observe carefully, now we are entering into the complex things. So just observe carefully and imagine what is there in the JavaScript engine, what is happening, and just go one by one line by line. It's easy, actually, it's easy. So here I'm just writing, so how much money function definition. Okay, if you invoke it, then only it will execute it, right? So here what I'm doing here, I'm just invoking this function. Observe carefully, I'm just invoking this function. Okay, even if you have a confusion right now, I'm not going to return anything, so we can remove this complexness. The simple, we have a one function called grandfather. Fantastic. So if you invoke this grandfather, so it will allocate the memory for assets and it will allocate memory for father. And then whenever you invoke this function called father, it will create another execution context for this. Okay, so this is going to be very interesting and complex. So right now, so let's see, we can go line by line. So even here, before this executing this father, what I'm doing, I'm just doing console.log assets. Okay, assets. So this information is there in grandfather, with the grandfather, so that okay, that's fine. So now, to avoid the complexity, first I will comment this code and I will ask the question, what will be the output? Hopefully it is clear for you. So whenever you invoke the grandfather, so we have only one variable, that is 100 acres land, and if you do console.log, it will print the output. We don't have any problem with that. So this is simple. So I'm just executing this. So then we can go and enable the full code. So if you see, assets 100 acres land, this is coming from the grandfather. We don't have any problem. Now what we are doing, I'm just adding a function called father, and I'm just invoking this also. So this is going to be very interesting. So then what will happen if you give this code to a JavaScript engine? Okay, if you give this code to the JavaScript engine, so I'm just taking the new file very carefully. You also should practice parallelly, like while you are doing if you're once you are watching this video again, please do practice parallelly. So now what is happening, so first of all you should remember, this is going to be create a call stack. So call stack will be there in the memory. First and foremost, it will create the global execution context. Observe carefully, this is going to be somewhat tricky. So global execution context. In that global execution context, we know we have a window object. We have a window object. Inside that window object, so we have two things. What are there? What are the things we have defined in the global execution context? The two things. One is the output, another one is the grandfather. Simple. So it will allocate the memory for output here. Initially, we know this is undefined, and the next one is it will allocate the memory for grandfather. Okay, that will be a function definition what you have given here. So it will store. So this is the first step, global execution context. Okay, right now the control is there in our global execution context. Observe carefully. So it will allocate the memory for output, and it has allocated memory for grandfather also. And this line, whenever in an execution phase, it is going to be invoke this function. So it is not, we are not expecting anything from from grandfather to return the value. So we are just simply invoking this function. So whenever you invoke this function, what will happen? Observe carefully. Whenever you invoke this function, obviously it will create another execution context in the memory, and it will change the control. So the control will goes from global execution context to a local execution context. This execution context name is grandfather. So I'm just writing here the name also, grandfather. Okay, grandfather. And again, what is there in the grandfather? So it will start allocating the memory for these things. So right now here we have two things. One is assets, another one is a father in that grandfather. So it will allocate the memory for assets and father. So this is local memory. So assets, initially that is undefined, right? Undefined. And another variable that is called father, it has a function definition. Okay, this is fine. So till this point, I think there is no complexity for you because you guys understood already. So now we are entering to the execution phase of the father, the grandfather. So even I will show you the same thing in the browser. Just refresh. So if we see, we have a variable output. So right now in this example we are not using. In after few minutes we are going to utilize this also. So if I put a breakpoint here, just refresh. So by this point, okay, we have, it is allocated a memory for global execution context and the variable called output and grandfather. Okay, if you expand this, you can easily find those variables, two variables. So now whenever you invoke this grandfather, yes, it is going to allocate the memory that is called global execution. Sorry, on top of global execution context, we have a special execution context for that particular function. So that is called grandfather. So if you see, as we discussed, the control will goes to the grandfather and it will allocate the memory for assets and father. That is also you can observe here clearly the local scope. If you see, assets right now undefined because still we didn't enter into the execution phase of that function. So father, it is holding the function definition. Fine. Now we can start executing that function. So if you see, once you execute this line, the you got the information 100 acres land. Okay, and now whenever you execute console.log of assets, so we don't have any problem to access this variable because right now you are in execution context of the grandfather and you are accessing your own variables, so there is no problem for us. And just now, so if you see the output, you got the assets as 100 acres land from the grandfather. There is no problem for us so far. Now we are going to understand the next level. So I'm just invoking the father also. So you are invoking this father is defined in a grandfather. function, and we are invoking this father from grandfather itself. So, okay, I'm just invoking this father. Then what will happen whenever you invoke this father? Because still you didn't come out of that function, because whenever you invoke this father at line number 30, this line number 30 is inside the function, it is not outside the function, it is there inside the function. Because observe carefully, this execution context for this grandfather will be gone once you come out of this function. If you come out of this function, then only it will remove that execution context for the grandfather. Otherwise, it will be there in the memory itself. Okay, so whenever you invoking this father, at the time it will create another execution context on top of grandfather, because grandfather is still there. Is We didn't come out of grandfather function. So what will happen here whenever you invoke the function called father? This is the most beautiful thing in JavaScript. So it will create another execution context on top of it. It will create another execution context. So it is not going to delete this one. It is not going to delete this one right now. Right now, it's not going to delete this one. So it will allocate the memory. And here, observe carefully. Observe carefully. Whenever you was there in the grandfather, whenever you was there in the grandfather, you are able to access your own memory plus lexical scope. That means who is the lexical scope for this grandfather? That is a window object, so that you can access your own information, plus you can access information from your immediate parent, that is called global execution context. So if you see, observe carefully here, this is the scope of, this is the global scope. So whenever you are there in this grandfather, for that you have some local scope, right? Definitely you have some local scope plus this global scope. So I'm just giving different colors for that so that it's easy to recognize. So this is the global scope which is there in the red color. This is the scope of a grandfather. Okay, this is the scope of grandfather. So this person, okay, this, whenever you are there in the local scope, you can access your own memory. Grandfather can access his own assets plus natural resources provided by the god. So this is the global execution context. That means natural resources provided by the god, so anyone can access it from the world from any point of time. So he has two scopes. One is a local scope plus his global execution context is providing another scope called a global scope. So you can see that one in the memory. So if you see in the local scope, he has its own assets, the assets, and this is local scope, right? This is local scope, and he is able to access global scope also. If you see, observe carefully, right now it is pointing the grandfather. He has two scopes, one is local and plus global. So that's what I just drawn here. This is local, this is global. The global means whatever there in the global execution context. So now what will happen whenever you invoke another function from the father? So it will create another execution context on top of the father. So now this control will move from father to, so grandfather to father. So whenever it is there, it will also create another scope, right? Another scope. And the beautiful thing is, okay, another scope. Now here there are lots of twists and turns. Okay, observe carefully. So naturally, as we discussed, so this father grandfather automatically accessing is lexical scope, right? And here also, observe carefully, the same thing will happen. You can get the access to your grandfather and the natural resources provided by the god. There is no doubt in that. So this is a local memory for father, and this is came from his own father, that is called grandfather. This is coming from the natural resources provided by the god, like global execution context means the god scope. Okay, for understanding purpose. So I'm just giving different color for this, that is a blue. So now things will be most beautiful. So let's see, Where is closure? We are discussing about from last 1 hour, but still we didn't see the closure. Don't worry, within next 2 minutes we are going to see what is the closure, where is the closure. Okay, just come close and just observe carefully. So fine, so now we are going to invoke this function. We are going to invoke this function. Whenever you invoke this function, what is the natural process? It will create another execution context, yes, and you are able to access to your father, and you are able to access their father also, and it will allocate the memory for this money, right? And you should able to access this. So now naturally it will allocate the memory for money, that is a variable. Okay, okay, let me change the color to a black. So money initially undefined, so whenever it executed, maybe it will be 50 crores. So let's see the browser. So now see the beautiful thing. Whenever you invoke this function called father, whenever you invoke this function called father, it will create another execution context on top of grandfather. Observe carefully. Boom. Yeah, grandfather, grandfather. So now if you see the variable, and now I'm saying that, hey Baba, I said it will create another scope for this, and it will access information from here and here, but observe carefully what is there in the browser. So now there are lots of twists and turns are there. So if you see what is there here, local means, the local means you're able to see money, you're able to see money. That means this is there, this is there, money is there, but unfortunately we are not able to access this one. This is not there. If you see, naturally it should come, but you are not able to see, because in this scope what is there? In this scope, assets is there, but assets information is not there here. Observe carefully. What is the twist here? Oh my god. Observe carefully. You are able to see money, that means it is local memory of this father, right? And you are able to access information from the god, that is called global execution context. But where is grandfather? I said grandfather is also automatically give his assets 100 acres to his son, right? But oh my god, he is not providing this information here right now. Okay, right now somewhere, okay, he's not there here. So if you see, this is the very important thing you should notice. Right now you are not able to see the lexical scope of this father, immediate lexical scope. So you are not able to see this assets information in the scope of this father. So you are able to access global execution, global scope, and you are able to access your own scope. But how to access your father's information also? So before going to that, just give me confirmation that, guys, are you able to understand what I'm talking? Are you able to observe what I'm showing here in the paint at the same time in the browser? Did you notice that this information is not their assets? Because in this yellow, that is the scope of the local scope of the grandfather, but grandfather is not provided that land papers to the son. What the hell is happening here? Did you observe this? Yes. Oh my god, what's this is the very big mistake done by grandfather. But here this is going to be a closure. You are going to understand what is closure now. So closure will happen whenever it is required. So if you see, right now, this father is independent. He is not depending on his parents' assets. He's not accessing, he's not trying to access this information. But whenever you try to access, whenever it is required, okay, father will always be there for you. Whenever you are in trouble, whenever you required some information, or whenever you required some help, whenever you required some support, at the time your father automatically will come to you. So right now your grandfather, so this father's father is not there with you in the memory, is not there with you, but Whenever you want some help from your grandfather, your father, console.log, whenever, that means you're trying to access it, right? So, father, I need you. So, something. So, I'm just putting some assets. So, if you see assets, so now observe carefully. Now, just debug again. Now, refresh the code again. Now, you will see your father. So, right now, I'm just putting a breakpoint here, grandfather. Execute it. Observe carefully. This is the most beautiful thing in JavaScript. That's why I fall in love with JavaScript. Okay, grandfather. Right now, global execution context is there. Now, if you see, we have invoked this grandfather. So we have a two scopes. One is the local scope of grandfather plus global scope. Two things are there. No problem for us. So now I'm invoking the father. So it just created another execution context called father. Now observe carefully in the memory. So here in the code, you are trying to access some information from your father. That means father understand that okay, the son is asking, is he needs some my help, so that he will come for you. Okay, now you will see this information, this scope also. Father, that grandfather also come in that scope. Observe carefully. I will show you that thing in the browser itself. Just open this one scope. The boom. You are able to see the closure. Right? Are you able to see closure? That means grandfather came now. So grandfather, your father, maybe after getting married, you will go out of the house. Okay, maybe you feel that maybe grandfather is not thinking about you. Your father is not thinking about you. But whenever you are in trouble, your father will come automatically. This is same concept, that is closure. So if you see, he will come in the form of closure. He will come in the form of closure. So God will come in the form of global scope. So you have your own memory, that is called local scope. If you need any help from your father or grandfather or any chain, that scope chain, they will come in the form of closure. This is so I hope you are able to see the closure. So maybe you feel like that you stay in a queue for 1 hour in the Tirupati. So after 1 hour, if you are able to see the God, so you will get a lot of happiness. So maybe after you're watching this video from 1 hour, now you are able to see first time that what is closure. So this is the closure. This is simple, and of course, lot of things we need to discuss. What is the definition of the closure, and lots of things are there. Lot of interesting and beautiful things are there in the scope. So we are going to discuss those things tomorrow. Right now, we have seen the God, okay, called closure, and then tomorrow we can understand a lot of important things surrounded by closures. Okay, now give me a confirmation. Oh my God, this is gone. I need to join again. Okay, sorry team. Lot of disturbances. Just now let me know. Do you guys understand what is closures now or not? Just give me a confirmation. Do you understand what is closures? Bala,
Yes, sir.
understood? Okay. So if you understand these closures, okay, go to our YouTube channel and just click on like button of this video, because this is the most important information. It should reach to everyone. Okay, it should reach to everyone. That's why, if you understand, if you don't understand, don't click on like button. If you understand the concept, go back and just open that video and just click on like button. And if you have any confusion, if you have any question, just ping me in that chat or ping me here. What is your question? So tomorrow we are going to understand all the important concepts um, with that closures. Okay, still we didn't understand the definition also. So tomorrow I'm going to explain in detail about closures. Okay, that's all for today, and see you tomorrow again. Bye bye. Bye.